Welcome back to Across Louisiana. Well, it's a museum that celebrates the history and culture of New Orleans, and they provide so much this area in terms of culture. It's the Historic New Orleans Collection. And here to tell us all about everything they have coming up is Erin Greenwald. Welcome to the show, Erin.
Thanks a lot.
For folks who might not be familiar with it, tell the people a little bit about what the Historic New Orleans Collection is and what you do.
Okay, sure. Well, we are a museum, publisher, and research center dedicated to the history and culture of Louisiana and the Gulf South. And when we say Louisiana, we don't just mean the current boundaries of the state of Louisiana. We mean Louisiana writ large from the colonial period to the present day.
Fantastic. An exciting new program coming up, Accompany Man. I see you have your book here for it. Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, we've been working for the past about 6 years, on bringing to life and making accessible a manuscript that was written by a clerk for the Company of the Indies who was stationed in Louisiana between 1729 and 1731. And we acquired this manuscript. It had never been published. It was never accessible to the public. It was written in French by this clerk, and we spent the last 6 years translating the manuscript into 21st century English that still had that ring of 18th century French. And I spent the last 5 years annotating the manuscript and researching the author, because when we acquired the manuscript, we didn't know anything about the person who had written it except his last name.
So, I mean, other than just a work of literature, I mean, this really has a historical significance to Louisiana, right?
Oh, absolutely. One of the most interesting things about this particular manuscript is that it was written for a small circle of friends and family members, and we know that because the nature of the manuscript never would have gotten past the censors, either by the king or the crown. And so you get this really unscripted, very personal, and often very charming and witty account of what it was like to not only cross the Atlantic, but to travel overland in France to the coast, from Paris to the coast, across the Atlantic, and what it was like to be here in the 1720s when the colony was in control of the French Company of the Indies.
Let's jump into that a little bit more. I mean, give me a little more detail and give me an overview of the story that's contained in there.
Sure. Well, the clerk received his overseas commission in 1728, late 1728, and he traveled from Paris, which is where the company headquarters are. And I should say the French had these large trading companies, just like the Dutch and the English East India companies. The French had a presence as well. And the clerk, his name was Marc-Antoine Caillou, traveled to Louisiana in 1729 aboard a ship called the Durance. He arrived here, spent 2 years here. He records some of Louisiana's natural history, which is this kind of formulaic part of the book that he wrote because there was the expectation, this Enlightenment expectation, that you would be recording and classifying and describing these New World environments. And that's probably the least interesting portion of the manuscript. Honestly, what's really great is when he goes off that script, and he does it frequently, and talks about his own personal experiences. He describes the first carnival celebration. He kind of crashes a wedding on Lundi Gras of 1730, and not much has changed.
Well, I know that sounds fascinating, and I know you know, in addition to that, you have lots of other current exhibitions going on. For people to find out more or where they could go to check this out, give the folks some information on that.
Sure. Well, right now we are very pleased to be hosting Seeking the Unknown, which is an exhibition looking at Louisiana's natural history from the early 18th century to about 1840. And that will be up in the Williams Gallery at 533 Royal Street through the beginning of June.
Erin, thanks so much for coming on and telling us all about it. It sounds awesome. We can't wait to check it out.
Thank you.